April 10th, 2001, a house in Scottsdale, Arizona, exploded. 3 people lost their lives that day, but this was no accident. It was a carefully calculated plan to end the lives of 3 innocent people. And the man who did this,
Robert Fisher,
is the father and husband of the victims. What truly happened in the previous night? And why did the FBI's hunt for him last 20 years? Let's find out. It's a peaceful night in Scottsdale, Arizona, USA. It's roughly 9 p.m. The night is otherwise quiet, if not for the loud arguments from the Fishers. The Fisher household isn't quite the happy one. Neighbors have been hearing arguments more and more lately, so it wasn't out of the ordinary when they heard an argument again. But today, something is different. The arguments stop abruptly. A gunshot is fired inside the home. Robert Fisher then packs all his clothes and gets into his wife's car. At 10:43 p.m., an ATM footage captures him withdrawing $280 in cash. His face shows no emotion. He then drives off into the dark, eerily quiet night. He has just committed a crime that would place him in FBI's 10 most wanted criminals and spark a nationwide manhunt for him. The neighborhood sleeps uneasily that night, unaware of the horror about to unfold. As the sun rose over Scottsdale, the Fisher household stood quiet until 8:42 a.m., when the silence was obliterated by a deafening explosion. The explosion was heard from miles away, rattling the frames of houses within an 800-meter radius. The flames rose up nearly 20 foot tall, and it took everything from the firefighters to contain it from spreading. It is understood from the investigation that Robert Fisher placed the bodies on the bed. He then pulled the gas line, letting the gas accumulate until it reached the igniter at the other end of the house. He then leaves to the ATM with a gun and all his clothes. By making the house blow up, he attempted to erase the events of the previous night, but the autopsy reports revealed everything.
This was a father that shot his wife in the back of the head and slit the throat of his 10-year-old son and 12-year-old daughter. It's unimaginable to most people.
The police labeled him as the prime suspect after a few days, issuing the warrant to arrest him on site.
The man missing after his family's bodies were found in a house is now being called a suspect in their deaths.
Robert Fisher is a murder suspect, and they have been told that if he is found, to arrest him on site.
On April 20th, 10 days after the explosion, the police got a lead that a white car was in the middle of the woods, nearly 100 miles north from Scottsdale. The hunt for America's most wanted man begins. A helicopter scours the forest area and spots a white truck not so far away from the road. It is confirmed that it is Mary's 4Runner, the car that was spotted in the ATM's CCTV footage 10 days ago. More than 100 police officers arrive and conduct the manhunt, but the reality quickly dawns on them. The search would turn far too hopeless quickly. This is a region densely populated with vegetation, and the team was not experienced with wilderness search. Only about a square mile was effectively searched out of 4,500 square miles of forest area. Moreover, at least 30 caves were located within a 400-meter radius of the car's location. To top it all, Robert was an avid outdoorsman, was once a part of the Navy, and a hunter. His survival skills could help him easily last a few days, if not weeks. We now have a murderer on the run, equipped with a gun and survival skills, and nearly 3 million acres of dense forest, riddled with caves. These caves had massive underground network, often extending for miles beneath the surface. The police was only able to search one of the caves. This was a losing battle. Robert Fisher practically eluded everyone. There was no sign of him or any clues left behind, except for two very interesting discoveries. First, the car was wiped clean. The only thing that the police were able to retrieve was a single fingerprint on a coffee cup, which belonged to Robert. Why would a murderer on the run spend the little time that gave him an advantage on cleaning the car of any fingerprints? The only possibility I can think of is that there was another person in the car with him, either before he dropped it in the woods or after it. This individual could have helped him escape and likely had a different vehicle nearby. Second, the family dog was found waiting near the car, untied. If he intended to survive in the wilderness, the dog would have likely followed him. To me personally, this doesn't add up. The only thing that seems plausible is that he got on a different vehicle, not so far from there, and the dog returned to the car, patiently waiting for his owner to show up, which never happened. 3 days pass. The search perimeter expands, but no sign of Robert Fisher. As resources stretch thin and morale drops, authorities had to make the difficult call. The manhunt is officially called off. 3 years pass. Investigators received hundreds of leads, but they all lead to a dead end. It seems as if Robert Fisher has completely disappeared from the face of Earth, until he was spotted in Canada. The Canadian authorities got a lead that someone who greatly resembled Robert Fisher was spotted in Whiterock. The American authorities, along with an old neighbor, go to Canada and set up a meet with the suspect. Here is the interview from the neighbor.
Basically pretended to book me into jail so that they could get me and Bob into the same room. Well, when he looked at me and I heard his voice, I knew it was him. And he stopped. He did that little look around the room and he scanned. And he came back to me and he just sort of got this instant look on his face like, what the hell are you doing? He has the same tooth gap. He has the same exact build. He has the same body language. He had the same mannerisms. He had the exact same voice. That was Bob Fisher. He took me out after I gave him the signal and said, well, what do you think? What do you think? I'm like, that's him. That's him. Don't let him go.
But then,
I mean, there were a lot of different traits. His nose, his facial features were very similar to Robert, but his fingerprints didn't match.
This individual was fingerprinted, was identified in Canada as having a criminal history. They knew who he was, and he was not Robert Fisher.
They brought his mother in, and his mother identified him, saying, this is my son. It was not Robert Fisher.
to this day, Robert Fisher hasn't been caught. No one truly knows where he is, or if he is still alive. As leads go cold and years turned into decades, one question burns brighter than the explosion that started it all. Why? What could possibly drive a man to kill his entire family? The answer to this question is buried deep in Robert's past. When Robert was 15 years old, his parents went through a very turbulent divorce, and it is said that this has left a deep scar in him. Interviews with his colleagues suggest he was affected by that even in his years of being married to his wife. The problems in his marriage started when he confessed to his wife, Mary, that he had been unfaithful to their marriage. It is believed that he had been unfaithful more than once, but there is much more to this. He was a complex and deeply disturbed man. He was described as a cruel and distant control freak towards his family. He once turned a garden hose on his wife after he perceived her to have spoken out of turn. He never let his wife hang up the children's drawings in the walls without asking him. Nevertheless, he seemed to have deeply cared about his image and concept of having a stable family. But Mary soon became sick of her life being like this, and that was his breaking point. For some reason, in his twisted mind, he would rather kill his children than let him go through what he went through in his past. He couldn't comprehend the possibility that the event that he had been running away his entire life would happen to him. He chose to become their end, rather than face his own beginning again. Due to the extensive publicity, on November 3rd, 2021, after being on FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives for 20 years, Robert Fisher's name was taken down from the list. Despite the removal, he remains a wanted fugitive. The case still remains open. Robert Fisher could be out there, alive. Perhaps, at this very moment, he could be watching this video. We might never know.